Welcome to Overwhelmed to Overcomer podcast with coach, encourager, and strategist Anna McLaughlin. If you're a Christian woman who has big dreams rooted in an even bigger God, but most days those dreams feel completely out of reach, trust me, I get it. As a homeschooling mama of 4, entrepreneur, investor, and all-around wearer of many hats, I am right there with you. And yet the Lord invites us to live out our God-given purpose now in the midst of the madness. So let's explore together how we can know our calling and walk in it today with clarity, with courage, with each other. It's time for you to live the life you love and love the life you live. Let's do this thing.
Hello and welcome to Overwhelmed to Overcomer podcast. I am so glad you're here. So listen, if you've been hanging around for a while, but you may have missed the episode that was 2 episodes ago, changes is what I called it. We are going through a refresh. I have been focused on homeschooling entrepreneurs for the past 9 months with this podcast. And guess what? If that's you, this is still your spot. You're still in the right place. If your heart is to deeply know your purpose and walk it out in the midst of the madness of life, often with little ones in the home, often with work to do, often with fun marriage moments and older parents and all of the other things that go through this crazy life that are a part of this crazy life, this is for you. How can I be faithful here? How can I love and honor the Lord here? How can I drink deeply from the gifts that He has given me and not be sidetracked and sure that I made it all up? That there's nothing that I can do that could be at all fruitful because there's just too much going on, or I'm disqualified in some way, or it's just too hard. Okay. So we are moving from overwhelmed to overcomer. And as a friend of mine and I discussed when I was first making this shift, it's not like you do it once, right? It's this place that we revisit where we're like, oh my gosh, it's too much. I'm okay. What we're going to talk about today is exactly that process. How do we go from that cycling up, that spinning, where we start to lose our cool and we start to be short-tempered and we start to doubt and we start to just want to tuck in bed in like a nice snuggie all day to, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I wrote a guide probably about 2 years ago. There was a place I was supposed to be. I was supposed to be on a work trip. And as the date of the work trip got closer, I was like, I don't want to go. Well, you know what I used to say when that little voice started creeping up? I don't want to go. Shh, we're going. We made a commitment. It's not just about us, it's about other people. We are going. And I'd go and I'd get sick and run down and worn out. And once I got home, I'd lose my cool with my people. I'd be frustrated, agitated, irritable. And so when that still small voice said, I don't want to go, this time I thought, and I said, why? And that's that little voice. It said, we always get sick and run down and worn out. It doesn't feel fun. It feels draining. And then I thought, well, what would we do instead? And you know what I did? I went to the beach and I wrote this guide called Overwhelmed to Overcomer. I'm going to drop the link for it in the show notes. If you don't already have it, I commend it to you. This is the process I use when life feels loud, when things feel overwhelming. And I just want to bring this to you as we shift into this space of moving from She Considers a Field to the conversation that we're calling Overwhelmed to Overcomer, to just honor each of you where you are, and to give you the tool that has brought so much into my own life. Okay? So it's very simple. And it's going to sound somewhat familiar too, if you've been listening to these conversations prior to now. We start by laying the pages of our life before the Lord in the temple. You've heard me talk many times about that precious passage in 1st or 2nd Kings. It'll be in the show notes, where King Hezekiah gets a throwdown letter from Sennacherib, the king of Assyria. And he challenges him and says, I've taken out this kingdom and this kingdom and this kingdom and this kingdom. I'm going to take you out too. I beat all of their gods. I'm going to beat you too. I'm going to beat your God too. And Hezekiah takes that letter and he lays it before the Lord in the temple. He lays the pages out before the Lord in the temple. He says, I know who you are. Help us. We need you. The Lord shows up. The enemy is defeated. Victory is proclaimed. All of the things that we need from God, they happened. So we have to start there. I call it a brain dump in the guide. We just lay all of the thoughts before him. I'm worried about this. I'm stressed about this. I'm uncertain about this. I need help with this. Give me clarity here. So for those of you on YouTube, I'm literally letting we call him my diva dog, letting my dog in to sit at my feet while I record this episode. He doesn't seem to know what he wants. Okay, so we lay the pages before the Lord in the temple and we ask for his help. That's our first step. We brain dump. What are all the things that are causing you stress right now? Where are you hurting? Where are you wounded? Where are you broken? Where are you uncertain? Where are you confused? Where are you angry? We need to recognize and speak out all of those lower order emotions, because here's the thing. You cannot, physiologically, you cannot be in two emotional spaces at the same time. You can move from one to another very quickly, okay? But it's kind of like being on a number line. You're either on number 1 or you're on number 9. You are not on 1 and 9 at the same time, okay? So too with our emotions. We cannot be bitter and joyful at the same time, okay? Someone needs to hear this right now. We cannot be in the joy of the Lord when we are holding on to bitterness, okay? And my own personal coach that I work with has offered me the most beautiful practice that he's learned from his own training and things like that. And this is a more physiological practice that has spiritual implications. And it lines up perfectly with what the Lord says in Scripture. The path to moving out of those spaces is not a change in circumstance. It's not willing it to be so. It's not saying, well, bless the Lord, everything's fine. I'm just going to thank the Lord for everything he's given. But we're really inside we're gnashing our teeth, right? We can't fake it till we make it. We can do that with actions. We can't do that with emotions, okay? We can't fake joy. We can't fake peace. We can't fake happiness. We can't fake love. We can't fake those things. So the path, are you ready? The path to moving from one emotional state to another is first acknowledging that it's there and then being willing to let it go. That's it. We acknowledge that it's there. I'm angry about this. I'm really disappointed. Starting to feel bitter. And then think about those moments where a child tells us the truth. Mommy, I lied. Mommy, I got mad. Mommy, I was really hurt. And we wrap them up, right? Because we can be heart to heart even when it's hard to hear, when someone tells us where they really are. That's the first step to intimacy, right? So we do the same with the Father. Lord, I'm really disappointed. I'm hurting. I didn't want it to look this way. And then we have to acknowledge, to some degree, we're still there. We're going to stay there until we're willing to let go of the payoff of staying there. Okay? So for example, if someone has hurt me and I am stuck in bitterness, what does that bitterness give me? Perhaps it invites me into self-righteousness. It provides some sort of justification for why my life looks the way it looks. If they hadn't said those things to me, then I would have had this opportunity that I didn't have otherwise. If they hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here. And it justifies us staying stuck. So once we recognize Romans 8:28 is true everywhere, then we have this invitation to lay it down. Are we willing to see what God has for us instead of these paltry little presents that we've held on to of our own? C.S. Lewis has this beautiful quote. I'm not going to get it quite right, but he talks about how we basically were like children building mud pies in the slums because we have no idea, no way to wrap our minds around, no conception of what a holiday at the shore could be. He says we fool around with drink and sex and toys and money and all of these little things. And then he says we are far too easily pleased. We are far too easily pleased. With our own emotional state as well, we're far too easily pleased. Well, it's got to be this way. I've got to be bitter. I've got to be angry. I've got to be resentful. I've got to be disappointed because of what happened. But the scriptures say no. No, God works all things together for good, for those who love him and are called according to his purposes. And so the invitation for us is to lay down our grievances before the Lord, to look at them as they are, to recognize that we can't change what happened, but we can change how we see it, the story that we write about it. And then there's that invitation to say, am I willing to view it differently? Am I willing to lay it down? So that's the first step. We write it all down. And then we look at, okay, what's the work? For some things, the work is simply to acknowledge this is hard, it's painful. But maybe it does. Maybe I don't have to view it as the death sentence I thought it would be, as the loss of the dream. Maybe, because here's what we need to remember. This is the thing. We don't serve a God who died only. We serve a God who defeated death, which means every dream that dies, there is a resurrection coming on the other side. Every time. Every single time. It may not look the way we hoped it would. We might have to let down our self-concept of what we thought it would be. We might have to let down some pride and some stubbornness, man. We might have to let down some stubbornness of like, it had to be this way. We might have to lay it down a little bit to be willing to take up the new that he's offering. But I promise you, he's offering it because that is what his word says he will do. Okay? So we lay out all the struggles. We tell him our sorrows is one of my favorite passages in The Horse and His Boy by C.S. Lewis says. It's one of the Narnia books. As I talked about in another episode, I can't remember which one. I'll drop it in the show notes though. Okay. So we tell him our sorrows. And then we take a look and we say, okay, I don't have to stay here. To some degree, the work that I'm going to be doing is a letting go. Being willing to move from that disappointment, discouragement, hurt, angst, all of that into that willingness to no longer stay there. And as we do that, literally my coach has me do this. I never even got to the tool. This is what he has me do. Breathe in and through the nose, very strong. Out through the mouth with a ha sound. Again and again. Just being with myself while I'm feeling whatever emotion I'm feeling. And you know the craziest thing? I was on a coaching call with him. And the call started out with me telling him, I feel so guilty because of this situation. I was hurting over something, related to someone in my family. I feel so guilty. I could have done something different. It could have looked different than it did. And he's got me breathing and I'm crying and he's holding the space. And holding the space, just for those of you who aren't in the coaching world, is a term that basically means sitting with someone while they have the experience that they need with no judgment or attachment. So he's not trying to get me to move through it. He's not trying to get me to see anything. He's not trying to anything. There's just room and there's witness. There's this offer of, I will sit here with you while you walk it out. And little side note, there is an incredible book about this. I think it's called The Rabbit Listened or something like that. It's a children's book. And it explains exactly this offering that we can give to other people. It explains it in a really accessible way. My children love it. So be sure to check for that in the show notes as well. I just keep pointing you to the show notes. I'm going to make sure you have everything you need. Okay. Such a fantastic book explaining exactly this, where, and I'll just spoil it for you because you need to know, it's too good. A little boy builds a big block tower. The block tower gets knocked over. And then in come all of these different animals, assuming the boy's emotional experience and offering that he go to that place. So one says, "Oh, you must be so angry." Another one just says, "You must want to hide away." Another one says, "Let's laugh about it." Another one says, let's do something bad to them." And then another one says, like, "Let's just forget about it and pretend it never happened." And then the rabbit comes, and the rabbit sits next to the little boy, because all the other things that were offered weren't sufficient, right? The rabbit sits next to the little boy and is just with him. And as the little boy receives that connection and love, he starts to process the emotions, and he expresses anger, and he expresses the desire to hide, and he expresses the bitterness and the desire to do it to somebody else, and he expresses the desire to forget about it or to keep it or to hold it close forever and just stew on it. So he goes through all of the processes that the other people assumed he was ready to do, but the safety and the love had to come first. And then at the end of the story, oh, it's so good, you guys. You need this book. At the end of the story, he's ready to rebuild. And he and the rabbit dream together. Okay. All right. So that's holding space. That's what coaching is at its finest. Okay. So here's what was so fascinating. It's a story within a story. You guys, you know how you know how I go. Okay. So I'm feeling guilty, and I'm telling him I'm feeling guilty, and I'm crying. And then at the end of like a few minutes, I kind of got quiet, and I said, "I just feel so sad." And he goes, "Great." I was like, "What are you talking about?" Well, guilt is one of the lowest order emotions that we can feel. It has very low energy. It's self-condemning. You're kind of stuck. You can't move forward. You get kind of paralyzed. Sadness is a much higher level emotion because you're feeling the emotion of the loss, but it's no longer self-condemning. So do you see I kind of moved out just by breathing? It was crazy. Okay, so good.
Okay, friend, I've got an invitation for you. As a woman of faith looking to serve God and walk in her calling powerfully, it's important that you feel good. And for me, my body completely shifted when I started taking high quality supplements that were really working with me in balancing hormones, healing my gut, and overall just helping me feel better in my own skin. If you're curious, Modere, the company that I've partnered with, is actually offering their best specials this month. So shoot me a message, find me on social media, and let's get you connected with that tool that's going to serve you so you can serve others.
We're going all kinds of places today. My notes were so much shorter than this, but like I get excited to talk to you guys. Okay, so we're going to tell him our sorrows. And then we're going to look at everything that we laid before him. And like I said, some things we simply work through, and ultimately everything we're working through by this letting go, this trusting the Father, this believing that he has always been with us and all that he has is ours, that we have this inheritance from the Father, that we are safe and beloved. But there's some times where we need to move our feet, right? And so when we look at the list and we see, okay, what choices do I have? What can I change? How can I show up in a different way? And as a result, get a different outcome, right? Something to be on the lookout for is the places where we feel angry or frustrated are often an indication of boundary violations. And listen, someone else cannot violate your boundaries unless you let them. I know that's not always fun to hear. But the good news about that is you can do something about it. Okay? Whether it's kiddos busting in when you need a quiet moment with your husband, whether it's, children choosing not to do chores, guess what? There's no weekend until there's chores, right? Whatever it might be, even little things like that, those can be places where it's time to put some attention and care to bring more order and balance and peace into the home. Okay. So once we're clear on, we pick the one thing. So we do one thing, not because there aren't many things to do. I know the list is long, but it's because we can only direct our full and focused attention on one thing at a time. Okay. Gary Keller from Keller Williams, the big real estate conglomerate, wrote a book called The One Thing. Don't read it. I can summarize it for you in just a concept. And the book is for some reason very long and confusing. So there's no reason. What he says in that book is he was trying to lead his leaders and help them get massive results. And he found that when they were trying to do 2 things or 3 things or 5 things or 7 things, they made no progress. When they instead shifted their attention to one thing and one thing only, and that was their key objective, their key performance indicator, they call it in business, all of a sudden their results exploded. We need to bring these same concepts that wise men and women out there have identified in the earthly realms into the heavenly realms. Because the truth of the matter is, this is exactly what the Lord calls us to when he calls us to be good stewards. We need to be faithful where he has planted us. Okay. And so we pick our one thing and we are diligent about that. When I make this recommendation, one of the things that I direct you to is considering Hierarchy of Covenants, which is a podcast episode we had many months ago. It's a conversation about recognizing there is an order that the Lord has placed before us. God first, then our husband, then our children. These are the covenants of our lives, okay? And then the many beyond that. Different priorities depending on where they fall in our time commitments. Is it a boss? Is it a family member that's really close to us? Those types of things. So take a look and see which of my covenants needs a little tending, and perhaps that's where you start your focus, right? And I talk you through in the guide, how can you layer things? How can you do one thing that's actually going to give you a win in many areas? For example, you might decide that one area that needs some tending, the one area that needs tending, is having really intentional connection time with your children. You're like, I've got it with the Lord, got it with my husband, the kids. The kids are next. It might be that you also want to reduce screen time. So maybe you come to choose a habit that is going to allow you to have family time and limited screen time during that time at the same time. Maybe there's a park date once a week. Maybe there's read alouds every evening, whatever it might be, Bible study time. So we're going to build a habit that works, because what we're endeavoring to do, we all have this pie in the sky, lofty view. I think we all have this. Maybe not everybody elevates it in this way. We stay more in the tasks and the day-to-day. But I think if we're really honest with ourselves, we all have this vision of ourselves, of what we want to be, based on what we value, based on our temperament, our interests. And so there's this dream out there. And then we have our day-to-day lives, and we can forget to look out and go, okay, how can I actually get there though? Because the way we get to that ultimate goal of here's how I want to live my life before the Lord, I want to use everything that he gave me, here's how I'm going to do it, is by showing up tomorrow and moving towards it. Our ultimate 50-year goal is made up of thousands of 24-hour days. We build the thing one tiny pebble at a time, and the things that we choose to spend our time on determine the person we become. Okay? So that's why this matters. When we're faithful in a little, he's going to set us over more. That is one of his kingdom principles in the parable of the talents. Here we are again. Okay? When we do the small thing, we have built the muscle that much more to do the bigger thing. Okay? So we pick our thing. And you know what? Sometimes you just close your eyes and point, or you do eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and that's okay. Okay? Just choose and say, I'm going to grow here. And then once we've called our shot and said, here's how I'm shifting, here's how I'm growing, right? Because being an overcomer, it's not about like winning all the time. It's about, how do I get 1% better? How do I show up 1% more faithful, 1% more heartfelt, 1% more loving, 1% more nurturing, 1% more present, 1% less attached to my phone when my kids are talking to me. Hello, right? It's those little things every day. And then when we fall short of our target, then we sit back and we go, what could I do differently next time? Okay. So once we've called our shot, then we take a little time and sit here. Why this goal? How does this reflect the life I feel called to live? Whom does he call me to be? And how does this reflect and capture that? Because ultimately, if all we're doing is ticking boxes, I mean, who out there has not started a tracker to track their water? Okay, how much water am I drinking? That's great. It's actually really, really good for us. It's a quick win in the health world, right? But why are we tracking our water? Is that the most important thing right now? Or are we actually like, spitting mad at our children and our husband all the time? And maybe we need to fast criticism, or maybe we need to be on our face before the Lord. Maybe we need to be tracking that instead. Don't just pile one more task just so you can have accomplished one more thing. And then you're miserable and you're just flailing all around and wondering why you feel so overwhelmed, right? Instead, come back to center and say, where am I really trying to go? And what one thing can I endeavor to be more faithful in that's going to move the needle in that direction? If you get to the water, that's great. Go ahead and hydrate too. But focus all of your attention and energy on that one most important thing. Okay? And then we just walk it out. Show up again tomorrow and do the thing. And the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And then one day you look around, and this is so important. We have to look around and see how far we have come. We have to look back and go, wow, he did it. I'm not who I was before. That's not prideful. That's honoring the Lord's work in our life. And we all have that inner toddler that doesn't really want to do the hard thing. So if we aren't celebrating and going, great job, you like 5 months ago, you would have blown your stack in that same situation and it didn't even bother you. That's amazing. A year ago, that would have taken you completely off the rails and you kept moving. A decade ago, you wouldn't have even gotten out of bed. And look, you're still showing up. You're still serving. You're still loving. You're healing. You're doing the thing. Right? So that's our process. That's how we go from glory to glory with the Lord while we're on this messy, imperfect, challenging, soul-stretching journey called life until he calls us home. So I want to invite you, as we're shifting from She Considers a Field, which was, if you didn't know already, really focused on serving homeschooling entrepreneurs as the main focus, into this conversation of going from overwhelmed to overcomer, which is for all Christian women who want to level up in their walk with the Lord, who are like, I want to be faithful, but I know I can only do it by receiving from the Father, who are sitting there recognizing there's more work to be done, and I don't want to wait until life gets tidy and there's no crazy and I've got it all figured out. How do I show up here? How do I be brave with my life? How do I build community and belonging with other people? How do I show up faithful? If you're here for this conversation, I'm here for you. Be sure to grab my guide, From Overwhelmed to Overcomer. And until next time, remember, you've got this because he's got you. Take care, friend.
Friend, thank you so much for listening to this most recent episode of Overwhelmed to Overcomer. So listen, the whole idea behind this mission is that when we endeavor to be brave with our lives, we need to do it together. Belonging is key. So if you resonated with the message from this episode, share it with a friend. Do it together. Thank you again. And until next time, never forget, you've got this because he's got you.